to Talking It Out. I'm Jonathan Geffner, and my special guest today is Maxim Lando, who is a brilliant young concert pianist who's making quite a career for himself already all around the world. Welcome, Maxim.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. It's fantastic to be here, and it's so great to get to talk to you. It's been
Ye-
way too long since I've seen you in person.
Yes, full disclosure to everybody, the viewers out there, that Maxim and I know each other because I taught for a year or two in your parents' music school, the Great Neck Music Conservatory, and you were always around, usually around, especially when you were little, because you were a little boy. I first met you there, and your family lived in the school, right, upstairs, and
Yeah, yeah, we still
still
do
do.
to
You're
this
right.
very day.
Yeah. So when I was teaching there, I saw you quite a bit, but also I teach an ongoing Yiddish class to a small group of students that's been going on for over a dozen years. So that's once a week, but I would, often see you there. And sometimes we even played some ping pong because you're
Absolutely.
quite a ping pong player.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have to say that every single time throughout the years, I've been like, okay, there's Jonathan. And I always try to put like a pin on what does Jonathan do? Because you do everything. He's a pianist, he teaches Yiddish, he's a ventriloquist, he does, 5 billion different things at the same time. So I'm always at the school and I'm always seeing you teach, different classes
Yeah.
throughout the years. And I was, oh my God, you know?
Well, yeah, I've done some workshops too now and then through these years, occasional workshops, how to become a ventriloquist. I mean, it's almost a second home through the years for me. I guess when I first went there, you were, what, 7 years old or something, something like that.
Something like
So
that.
I remember at one point back then, I remember your mother's a pianist. For those who don't know you or about you, mother's a pianist, your father's a clarinetist. So your mother said that you said you'd like to take a lesson with me on the piano. I guess just you're curious about trying out different teachers, and that never actually happened. But at one point, it's like I look back in amusement at that right now because I'm thinking, well, back then I guess I probably could teach you something, but now I could take lessons with you because you're the
I don't think that part's true at all. No,
well, you're modest. I'm a very, very rusty old pianist at this point, and you're a very active and amazing young concert pianist. When did you actually first start playing the piano, learning the piano?
I mean, I think I started when I was must have been three and a half, four, somewhere around then. I always used to sit in on my mom's lessons from when I was younger, and most times she would kind of, indulge me for a little bit and then kick me out eventually when I became rowdy, or a little bit crying at that time. But she let me work with a wonderful woman who taught at the school for a number of years, Mei Chun, who I think you knew Mei Chun or.
I don't recall the name. She taught at the school. Great.
Taught at the school. She might have left when you came because she taught there even before my parents took over the school. I mean, she was with the original owners for my God, must have been 30, 40 something years. But she was just, I mean, she became like a second mom to me, to the point that, our lessons pretty much consisted of, her and I playing pieces that were far too difficult for me at the time, but we both loved them. So she would really help me out. And then half of the other time, I'd just be laying down on her lap, like drinking juice, and she'd be, singing me the alphabet or things like that.
Your mother also taught you. I guess she was a supplementary teacher, or maybe was your mother your main teacher at any point?
Absolutely. I mean, I think my mom has always been my main teacher. Even now,
Oh,
I play for her on a pretty much regular basis every day.
huh.
So it's I mean, same thing with my dad too. It's like it's a whole family thing. So I just whenever I have concerts coming up or pieces that I want to try, I always want to try it out for them because they know it. They know the pieces inside out, and they're obviously so immersed in the whole music scene. So it's really great to get to try it out for them.
I remember your mother telling me once long ago that you're learning the Liszt Transcendental Etudes with her help, of course, and at some ridiculously young age. I don't know. Do you remember how old you were when you started learning them?
Yeah, well, the List Transcendentals have been a project that I've wanted to do since the day I began learning the piano. But no, I mean, I tried to. I think I was probably like 9 or 10 when I started like
Yeah.
dabbling with some of them. And Matron actually, I don't remember if she was playing one of them or she had recently taught one of them. She had some affiliation with one of the Transcendentals, and I think I got it in my head, and it's like it became an earworm for me. I felt like I had to do them.
Yeah. And
And then,
then
yeah, a little bit later on, I felt like to play them as a set is something totally different than just doing some of them individually.
right.
And
And
especially,
that you've done, as some of our viewers might know, and you should know if you haven't. You've got to check it out. Is it on YouTube or someplace online that your performance of all the etudes, the list etudes, or not?
I'm not sure if it is on YouTube. I know it's on somewhere. I'm actually going to be playing it in like a week and a half in the city, which will be a lot of fun.
Oh, that's great. Well, we'll post the information about that in case people can or hear. This is in New York City, you're saying, yes? Oh,
Yeah.
that would be great. When did you first perform the complete set of Liszt Transcendental Etudes? Remember, you were 16, 17, something like that?
Yeah, it was around 15, 16.
15.
Yeah, no, I remember I tried it out a number of times. It was right when I was lucky enough to become part of the Young Concert Artist Management several years ago. And with that, it comes with a debut at the Kennedy Center and at Zankel at Carnegie. I was thinking of kind of what would be my dream program to play at these places. And the Transcendentals they've always been on the bucket list to do. So.
I'm going to try to catch this concert coming up, so I'll get the details from you because I have not heard you perform them live as a set. I know I heard you practicing them a bit once times that I've been in there over the years, and it's really amazing how young you were and still are. But when you first performed them as a set and to great critical acclaim, because I read some of the reviews, really astounding. At what age do you recall that you started dreaming of being a concert pianist? Did that happen at a certain age, or do you remember, or do you not remember a time that you didn't want to be a concert pianist?
No, I mean, I think I've always loved music ever since I was young. It's always been a huge part of my life. I always say that when your parents are musicians, you either hate it or you love it. There's very, few times the middle ground. It's, kind of one of the extremes. Because, a lot of people rebel, and when their parents, do something, then you're like,
Uh,
don't really have an interest in it. And a lot of times it's the opposite. You get encouraged by it. And I think that's what happened to me. I grew up, on long car rides. We would listen to the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, and we'd listen to, Rock Third Piano Concerto, and all the different great violin and piano music, especially a lot of clarinet music. So it was always kind of in my blood. And as time went on, I just grew to love it even more. I think initially I always had that dream of being a violinist and a pianist, kind of at the same time. I loved the violin rep. Sometimes I would listen to it even more than piano music. But
and do you take? I think you took lessons for a while, or did you on the violin? A
I
little bit.
did. I took it with Simone, and my God, that was my favorite time of the week. I could not play for the life of me. I could not get a single note in tune. I was so bad that my parents had to hide my violin from me. Um,
Well, I wonder why that is. That is bizarre because you're so gifted, obviously, on the piano. So I'm sure you would have gotten the hang of it eventually if you were stuck with it. But I
I
guess
don't
you
know.
were.
It's a hard instrument. It's piano. I think anybody. I mean, I think piano is obviously it's a tough instrument. I think once you get to a certain level to have beautiful sounds and to kind of vary it, make it not all sound the same. But I mean, you don't have to worry about being in tune. You don't have to worry about the certain posture issues that you worry about with the violin. So it's some advantages and some disadvantages.
Right, some other different challenges too. With the pianos, we have so many notes to contend with, right? Because all those 10 fingers are put to good use very actively, and so there's more to think about in that regard. Being a concert pianist is one of the most challenging things anyone could do, especially these days. When I was young, and considering I got some encouragement, like to maybe try to be a concert pianist, but I gave that up quite early, and I'm glad I did in retrospect because I prefer the path I've gone on for me, and mainly because it is such a difficult route, and you have to really have all the elements together to make it work. I mean, you've got to be the right temperament in addition to having tremendous talent and fortitude and desire to do it, and all these kind of things. And you certainly have all those elements. So in a field that is growing all the time with amazingly talented young pianists, like every year there's a new crop. It really is amazing. You see these contests, competitions that are broadcast, and like I'm always flabbergasted at where do they come from? Like they just everybody plays so brilliantly, or and yet you actually do stand out, in my opinion, amongst this elite group as a truly mature musician, even at your young age. You don't play. Even a few years ago, I remember I think commenting to you once that I heard a recent performance of yours, and I commented you don't sound like an excellent student. Even a few years ago, you sounded like you are a full-fledged musician in addition to having mastery of the piano technically. So I think the future is very promising for you if you want to continue in this direction, which I
Well,
assume
that's
you will.
really, really kind of you to say. No, I mean, I think it's exactly what you said before about every year the people just get better and better. And it's not just in terms of, whether they can play, cleaner or faster, or, all of that, but they're just every year it's more diverse players too. I mean, you have such a wide spectrum of personalities. And I think, in so many ways, I think that was lost maybe. I wouldn't say it was ever lost, but people always talk about like the golden age of piano or of music when Horowitz and Rubinstein and Richter and all of those pianists who had major personalities, and you could without even looking at them you can instantly tell, okay, that's a Horowitz recording.
Mm.
And then maybe that kind of notion, I feel like a lot of people have commented over the years that it's kind of gotten lost and it's evened out. But I feel like now we're kind of in an era where these personalities are just coming back, and
Hmm.
just out of pure love for the music and love for what we do. So it's
I've noticed that too, and there has been this rap against recent decades of young musicians coming up that a lot of them are very mechanical, and they play flawlessly, but there's not much personality or expression in their playing. And I think that was often true, but less so now. I think that I'm impressed with how many do play with expression and sort of maybe getting back a bit to that older age as you're referring to.
I mean, I think even pianists, at times who do play just technically, they're just off the walls, brilliant. I think that's an art form in itself, and I appreciate the heck out of that because it's something that I feel like I lack a lot in my playing. I never really grew up with doing the constant scales and exercises and arpeggios or all that stuff. So when I hear somebody that can play I don't know. What's a good example? Liszt Don Juan. I'm working on that right now. I mean, it's just a beast of a piece for the piano, and it's just nonstop. Thirds
Yeah.
cascading down, and arpeggios and octaves everywhere. So when I hear a recording that is just crystal clear and it makes sense and it sounds great, progressively, it makes me enjoy listening to the piece even more, and it makes me want to play the piece.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I think it depends also on the particular piece and the repertoire. I think that some pieces of music and types of music feel very satisfying just to hear a very clean performance, right? That you don't really you can get by without anything else really. Like I think to me a lot of Scarlatti pieces are like that. If people play crystal clear, very cleanly, and it's brightly, and it can be very satisfying,
yeah.
even if there's not much depth to the playing, and other pieces too. But of course, it's always even better if you have something more to put into it, as I feel that you do. You play recitals, some solo recitals, as well as concerto performances. So for those who don't know out there, maybe viewers who are not very familiar with classical music, a solo recital meaning a concert that a soloist gives, just the pianist up there. In the case of piano recitals, playing solo music, and a concerto is when there's a soloist instrument with an orchestra. Piano concertos, obviously. Piano concerti, if we're doing it properly grammatically, right? Concerti, but in Americanized or anglicized, we say concertos. Do you have a preference to play concertos as a soloist with orchestra or a solo recital?
Oh, I love doing them all. I think if you just had to limit yourself to one of them, I feel like you're always missing out on the next. I mean, the three things are just the solo recitals, the concertos, and also chamber music, which is fantastic because you get to collaborate with other people. And, I think a lot of times each have their own advantages. With solo recitals, it's your show. You can conduct it however you want. If you run into trouble throughout your recital, if something doesn't go according to plan, it's completely in your control to maneuver it however you desire. So with that you have complete power. And I kind of like that. I mean, I can be power hungry at times, and
Mm,
hopefully not in a bad way, but in a way that I do love to have ideas, and I love to try and showcase them as much. So it's your conception. You have control over the program most of the time. And you get to whether you want to talk in between each piece, whether you want to talk in the beginning, at the end, however you want to divide it, you can format it that way. With concertos, it's more of a collaboration. Even though you are, technically the soloist who's playing with the orchestra, there are. I think it's also a toss up. There's a lot of piano concertos where it's more like chamber music. I think both of the Brahms
mm,
concertos are really
yes.
such a collaboration. The orchestra has, in some ways, even more than the piano has. So it's that kind of blends into the chamber music category. And then you have others where the orchestra is, mainly in the background and the piano's really at the forefront. And it's just, it's fantastic to not be completely alone and to get to share, ideas with the musicians, around you, to get to share it with the conductor, to get to share it with, all the members of the orchestra. I think that's what's fun about it.
I think for a classical pianist, playing concertos has the added advantage of bringing you into contact with other musicians, because it's a very isolating world as a concert pianist, because you have to spend so much time practicing and you're by yourself, and then if you're a solo pianist, then you're up on the stage again by yourself. Obviously it could be very gratifying, but it still has a lot of elements of isolation in it. And when you're playing concertos, well, you're working with other musicians up there, so right, it's more socializing, as well as playing chamber music, which means playing with small groups of musicians, classical music written for small groups of musicians, for those who don't know out there. And so that's why I'm sure, I assume that's one of the reasons that you enjoy chamber music as well, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I I still remember there was a time when I did. I think it was. I don't remember if it was a solo or a chamber concert, but it was some concert, and it was at this castle area. And I remember there was a little bit of a walk between the venue and the dressing room, where you put your stuff. So I just did the concert, and the reception was, really enthusiastic. Everybody was standing up. There was, fantastic. Couldn't have asked for a better audience reaction. So I was thinking, okay, fantastic. This went really well. I'm feeling really good about this. And I'm packing everything up, and I'm walking over to the dressing room. And the same exact people that were, just standing up and applauding and giving a great reaction are now in their cars honking at me and saying, get out of the way, get out of the road, what are you, an idiot? Don't do that. And, so it just goes to show you that, I think no matter what concert you give, I think no matter what spotlight you have, no matter whether it's solo, chamber, orchestra, or any of that, it lasts for, you're on a high for a certain amount of time, and then afterwards you're immediately brought down to reality. And that's what I love about it, because I think, if you were to always have that high, then a lot of times it's hard to, maybe it's not hard to have the motivation to keep doing. I mean, I certainly would love that at some point, but I think you kind of need the constant, ups and lows to really get in the game mode, to have.
Mhm.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Yeah, oh, yes, I understand that makes sense to me. We have a little clip I'd like to play for everybody of the Liszt Concerto number 1, your performance. We can only put a little excerpt up here, but it'll be whet everybody. It should whet everybody's appetite to go listen to the whole thing on your own. So you want to set it up? Do you remember where this was from? Which performance, where you were?
yeah, absolutely. This was for actually part of a competition, the New York List competition. Oh my God, it was such a fun and crazy experience. My friend had found out about the competition through, I think, word of mouth, and he wrote to me and he said, listen, you would be a fool to not do the competition. It's the prize is that you literally get to play at Isaac Stern Hall at Carnegie, with the Orchestra of St. Luke's, fantastic orchestra. And I mean, this is, every musician's dream. I wouldn't even say musician. I would say this is any entertainer's dream to play on that stage. So I immediately wanted to take advantage of it. I put my name in. I kind of put it out of my mindset for a while. I thought, okay, well, I'm probably not going to get it. They choose 4 people, and that's, the end. And then all 4 people play at Weil and at Isaac Stern. So I put that out of my mind, and then I think it was like a couple days before the competition started, when I got the news that I made it, and I was so grateful. And I was like, oh shoot, okay, now I really have to practice and learn this music. So
So
the Liszt Concerto, it's obviously one of the standards of the piano rep. I think it's one of the most played pieces of music. But it's also a piece that I'd never played before. I absolutely love this concerto. It's such a blast. I feel like it's one of those pieces that you can always find new things and new little quirks and ways of, bringing out different voices and different runs and how to get this effect in, different sections. So I had such a fun time putting it together. But it was definitely a close call, and I could not have been. I think still to this day, it's probably one of my favorite performances that I've ever done. Just the fact that it was at Carnegie Hall, which is always
Um,
a dream of mine, and to play a great concerto there, it was it was a real big honor for me.
well, here it is, an excerpt from Maxim Lando playing Liszt Concerto Number 1. That was Maxim Lando in a performance of Liszt Concerto Number 1. So you've won other awards. I know I don't have the list in front of me, but I know modesty would prevent you from mentioning them yourself. But I'm going to ask you if you don't mind telling us or reminding us some of the other awards you've won along the way of your early career path.
I mean, I've never been much of a competition pianist, so there's not too many. Oh, also for the list competition, I do want to say because I have so much respect for him. I shared the prize with an incredible pianist, I Chang,
Oh,
who's absolutely phenomenal and off the walls, and he gave a list one that absolutely blew
hmm.
me away in every way.
Don't mean to put you on the spot about the enumerating competition when actually I realize you haven't entered many competitions per se, right? But you've I know you've won some other awards,
Well, I
some
can say, yeah. I mean, there haven't been that many, but I mean, definitely one of the ones that stuck out to me is the Vendome competition, which I think in the previous years it used to be held in Verbier, as part of the Verbier Festival. But this year, I mean, the year that I did it, it was part of COVID. I think it was last year or the year before. I think it was last year. And I have so much respect for this competition because they really let you do whatever you want in terms of programming. In most competitions, there, including this one, there's like classical sonata that's required, and I think there's certain requirements. But in terms of, I just remember that for the final round of that, I did. I did this just absolutely out there program that I didn't even expect them to let me do it to begin with. It was all of these mix of pieces, some classical, some jazz, and I think I even threw in some of my own arrangements of like different pop tunes or different Netflix shows. I think I did one on Squid Game or something. And
that is an unusual competition.
it's a very unusual competition in the sense that they really let you do that, which I have so much respect for because then you're in total control over how to set it up and and whether people follow you for your journey that you're hopefully bringing them for or not. That's a different story. But I was lucky enough to just really connect with the people, and that was a really fun one. It came with a great group of people, and I made a lot of friends at that competition, especially because it was for the final round. It was three people, and I also split the first prize with another wonderful pianist. So that really sticks out. When I was younger, I did one in Russia. It was in Moscow, and I think I was maybe 13 or something like that. And I went with my dad for that one, and it was the first time that he had ever been back. He's from Ukraine originally, but it was the first time he had ever been over to Russia since from when he was a kid. So we had a very very memorable time over there in a lot of different ways, just to see the different appreciation and love for music in that area. And of course, it's absolutely awful and what's going on right now, but love for classical music and the love that the audiences shows are really heartwarming, and something very very special. I don't know if you've ever seen Queen's Gambit, the chess show.
Yes, I saw that on Netflix. You mean the
Exactly, yeah.
yes,
Well,
right.
when she's versing against the Russians in that final round, I think everybody, was on edge for what the reaction and what the reception would be like. But you see just how warm they are, and it's one of those very, very touching moments. And again, of course, it's absolutely horrible what's going on right now. But it's
Yes.
in terms of that, yeah.
And tell us about your association with Lang Lang, very famous piano. Probably everybody, even if you're not a classical music listener most of the time, probably everybody knows Lang Lang, one of the most famous pianists in the world. Often called Lang Lang, but I believe it's properly Lang Lang, isn't it? The Chinese way.
I think it's long. I think, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I have.
Yeah, I know, but you have an association with him, and how did that happen?
Well,
Tell us.
yeah, he has a foundation, and when I was, I think, around 10, 11, I auditioned for it and was lucky enough. They have this wonderful program called the Young Scholars, where they basically take a group of people and they send you all across the world to, multiple different countries to perform concerts and perform at different festivals and they pay for everything. It's a completely free trip. They provide you with so many different connections. And then it's up to you to make the rest of it. But pretty well everything that I've had so far, in terms of concerts, has in one way or another connected back to the Long Long Foundation.
Hmm.
So I owe so much to them, and it's
Eh,
yeah. I mean,
You've
they're
performed with Lang Lang too, haven't you?
I did, yeah. Long was out of commission for around a year and a half for a hand injury in his left hand. I think he was practicing the Ravel left hand concerto.
Oh, oh,
Most pianists, especially people who are concertizing as much as him, would cancel the shows and would say, I have to take a hiatus for this amount of time. But he wanted a way to continue the music and find a way to continue the concerts. So he came up with such a fun idea. We took Rhapsody in Blue, and we did it. We did a three-hand version of it, where I did two hands and then he did one hand, and we would cross over and intertwine fingers and play all over the keyboard together.
I saw some excerpts from that online. That was very impressive. How did you arrange to do that? Was it did he or you or anybody actually write out an arrangement, or is it mostly just kind of improvised arrangement?
Yeah, it was mostly, I mean, we met up a couple times and we just tried to see, what would work in terms of, who would play this section. But I think in general, it was just the two of us coming up with it. And it was very free spirited. We did a lot of just, sudden things for the days of the concerts. And I mean, the person that really inspired both of us was to work with Chick Corea, who,
Mhm.
took the word improv to an entirely new level. And we became really really good friends after the concert that we did together. But it was yeah, I mean, I think especially after that time that we played with Chick, I remember that Long and I would suddenly change it up, and we would
Mm.
add different things, and we would try and just be even more free with it, and have even more of a blast with it. But
Chick
that was
Corea is probably known to most of our audience also because he was unfortunately he passed a couple of years ago, I believe, not too long ago, and he was one of the preeminent jazz pianists in the world. And so you met him through Lang Lang? Is that
I
how it
did.
happened? Chick
I
Corea?
did, yeah. We were, I mean, I got the call that for the Rhapsody in Blue, I think we had done it in Pittsburgh. And then the second one was at Carnegie, and it was for the opening night gala. And it was with Philadelphia and a wonderful conductor, Yannick Nesek-Segan. And oh my God, we had a blast doing it. Yeah, I mean, when we got the call that Chick was going to join us on another piano, and join us for the Rhapsody in Blue. It was I think we were both on cloud nine. I've been the biggest Chick fan for all of my life, listening to all of his recordings. So yeah, it was just I still remember that every time when we were rehearsing, and when we were I would always get there early in the hopes that that Chick would walk in right when I was playing something, so that maybe he could catch a glimpse, and then I could try and show gloat a little bit, or whatever
Yeah.
you call it, because I just wanted to say, oh my God, Chick Corea was here and he got to hear me play something. But every time we were rehearsing it, Chick would change it up. So there was never
Mm.
one time that it would sound the same. I mean, he would always be, going on some, giant tangent in the piece, where you would never know how it connects to Rhapsody in Blue, and then it would connect perfectly. And it just all made sense in the end. It was, yeah, just unforgettable for me.
Your association with Chick Corea, did that inspire you to go into jazz? Do you have any thoughts about that, to branch off into jazz? It's not something that most classical musicians do, because I've found that it's rare for somebody to equally do both, or to equally excel in both is extremely rare. I don't know if anybody, not that I can think of, who's really a great jazz pianist and classical pianist. However, some people do, go back and forth, or try it, whatever. So is that something that interests you, to play jazz?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think even from when I was young, jazz. When I was at my grandma's house every year in Winnipeg, Canada, we would they would always be playing in the cars. My grandpa, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago, he was a huge big band lover.
Mm,
So he loved all of the Duke Ellington big bands and the Miles Davis and the
mm,
Charlie Parker and all of that. So we would be listening to that on all the car rides. And I think I got that into my system from when I was young, and I would always be screaming out in the car, one more of the big
mm.
band, one more time. So I loved that. And then of course, when I met Chick, I started just exploring the endless possibilities of jazz, because he was really the person who kind of in so many different ways had the ideology that music doesn't need to have labels,
Mm,
that jazz and classical, maybe there's not such a far line between them. It's actually much closer than people think.
mm.
And he would so frequently take different classical compositions, whether it's Mozart or Scarlatti or even some Haydn and Beethoven, and he would just go off on these incredible jazz improvs on them, that were brilliant, and they made
I saw some video on YouTube
yeah,
where he improvised on the famous Chopin A minor nocturne.
yeah,
No, nocturne, mazurka,
Mizuko.
mazurka,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, and that one I was thinking at the time that that lends itself particularly well to it because it's sort of jazzy to begin with. That it's kind of right the way Chopin wrote it. It sounds kind of improvised.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, he was so good at doing them. I went through I went to his house once a few years back, and we had this whole recording session where I did all of the Tchaikovsky seasons. And the plan was that afterwards he was going to he so after I did each of the seasons, he would go up to, to his piano and to his keyboard, and he would just start, on the spot, just diverging into it. And he even did something with Balakir of Islameh.
Oh, really?
Not even sure
Uh,
how you improv on that.
Yeah, that's already stretching the limits of human capacity to play all the notes in that thing, right?
Exactly, exactly. No, I mean he was honestly one of a kind in every way.
Yeah.
And jazz, even I mean it's been following me even in the college life. My roommate is an incredible jazz trombonist. So I listen to, and he's also the biggest Duke Ellington specialist that you will ever find. I mean, he knows everything about Duke Ellington, and including all of the. He just arranged an entire concert full of all of these obscure, a mixture of obscure and well-known Duke Ellington songs, and they're fantastic. So I mean, I don't think that there's a single night at college that I don't listen to some kind of form of jazz. So it's and it helps so much in classical music too.
Yeah.
It has this kind of free spirit nature that I love, and that I think the
Yes.
composers kind of would have wanted you to have anyways. I mean, Rachmaninoff was so influenced by jazz, and
Ravel also.
Ravel, and I mean, so many of the impressionistic composers, Debussy. It's yeah, I love that.
I remember during the pandemic, you gave several concerts, several recitals from your parents' music school, from the main room there, right? And one of them was an improvised one. I remember watching that. I think the whole little concert, you just improvised a concert, right? Wasn't it? As I recall,
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
was a complete. So that was very impressive because classical musicians don't improvise much anymore, right? As we were alluding to, it used to be that they would do it much more. In the past, it was actually an expected part of each concert, right? Back in Mozart's day, and
Oh,
even beyond, Chopin and Liszt in particular, there would always be at least part of the program would be actually just improvising. But that's something that I guess as the repertoire expanded so amazingly for piano, such amazing incredible pieces of music were written, and there and people were just hungering to play all this music. There's no time to play all this. So it's like I guess that's one reason I'm thinking why people got away from improvising. Is like there's so much great music to learn, like the heck with improvising, right?
yeah.
That may be one reason. I don't know if other factors are part of that, but it was courageous of you to actually do that, since it's rare for classical pianists to actually improvise it, certainly to do that much of it.
It has so many things that it can help you with. I mean, especially if you know how to get yourself out of a sticky situation. Let's say you're playing a piece of music, you have a memory slip. I mean, the show's got to go on somehow, and the goal is always to make it as, not noticeable to an audience as possible. So if you can just improv your way through it or come up with something as seamless as possible, it always helps. And more than that, it's just fun to do. I've always been into composing. I haven't done that much, but I'm really starting to get into it, especially recently. So, and I've also been, especially when the quarantine started, I was really interested in like songwriting. So I can't sing for the life of me, but it's something I've always wanted to do, and I'll still try to do at some point. But I love coming up with different melodies, and I feel like it's such a worthwhile and rewarding part. Once you have a melody that you truly believe in and that sticks in your head, it's a great feeling. You feel like, oh, I got it. I
Hmm.
got something that's, that could be an earworm, and that I really resonate with. And that's, I think, the most important thing. If you're a believer of your own thing that you create, which is hard for me to do because I kind of throw away a lot of it, and then once in a blue moon you'll hit the jackpot, and you're like, yeah, that one really works.
You mentioned dealing with memory slips, and that brings to mind uh, the fact that I think everybody encounters that at some time, especially when the concert pianists are expected to memorize this vast amount of music. So it could happen to the best of anybody. And I remember seeing there's a clip of Rubinstein, well, not just a clip, a whole concert recital that he gave, I believe in Warsaw. It was an all Chopin recital, I believe, and he was playing the second sonata, and he had a memory slip in the was it the third movement? Have you seen that, or are you familiar with it?
I
Because it's
haven't,
like
but I've heard about it. I've heard so many people talk
yeah,
about it.
so you could see that he's floundering for a few seconds there, and he improvised something. Just it sounded convincing enough until he reminded himself how to get back into it. But what sticks to mind in that, it's not that it's no catastrophe or anything, but it's curious. Well, first of all, it's always nice to see that everybody's human and that it can happen to anybody. But second of all, in Rubinstein's case in particular, I remember reading that he had a photographic memory. He talked about that in his autobiography, which I read way back. So apparently, even a photographic memory is not fail-safe, right? So there's like I suppose that most of the time his memory worked as photographic, which seems to be a huge advantage for those few people who have that. But even so, even a photographic memory, it could fail, right? And just all of a sudden, and also Heifetz, I remember reading an anecdote about him that he was playing a concerto someplace, I don't remember where, but he was playing one of the standard, I think it was Sibelius, and he had a memory lapse, which was a like he really got stuck. From what I read, like he couldn't work his way back in. The orchestra stopped, and he consulted, looked at the score, and they started the movement again. And it happened a second time. Finally,
Oh,
the third
wow.
time he got through it. Do you ever hear about that? Or
No, I didn't hear
I
about
know.
that.
Yeah, so that was kind of a major one when you really get stuck and have to. And Heifetz, one of, if not the greatest violinist of all times. So that's pretty. Oh, and that also brings to mind a question: since you are already a very successful concert pianist, I wonder about the just the issue of memory, because it is such an important part of being a concert pianist, since the tradition has brought us to the point where people expect you to play everything from memory. And there's some people who are bucking that trend, I know, anyway. But have you found that memorizing is just a natural process as you learn a piece, or do you consciously work at memory in one way or the other?
Yeah, I think the thing with memory is that you touched upon. Well, I guess I'll start with this. In terms of my own memorizing process, I think it's been something that came relatively natural. I think mainly because I just listened to a lot of the music. So I think once you get more familiar with the music that you're playing, if it's something obscure that you really aren't attuned with, and that you haven't heard a lot before, or especially if it's a new piece that's just been written. Maybe that can be definitely a bit difficult, especially if something doesn't
Mm,
have that many patterns, or if it's kind of
mm,
awkward in terms of how it's written. But for the most part, memory has come relatively quickly, which
mm,
I'm very grateful of. I think it comes at a cost. If you memorize quickly, it's great for the short term effects. Like if you have to rush a concert, and if you have a performance lined up for a couple days from when you're set, and you really have to dive into crunch time to get it done. Then it's very helpful, because if you learn quickly and if
mm,
you memorize it fast, then you can pretty well do whatever you want, and still have the show. But the cost is you learn it a lot of times the wrong way, and maybe there's not a right or wrong way to learn it, but there's a certain familiarity with the piece that you want to experience over time, because the more that you live with it,
mm.
obviously, the more comfortable you feel, the more you're able to change it up the way that you hear the piece, the more you can live with it. So yeah, I definitely think that memorizing quickly, it can be a bit dangerous for those things.
Mm.
But I just going back to what you were saying about memory versus, using the music and how some people are breaking the trend of that. That's something I'm very interested in because I'm not quite sure what prompted the entire, ideology in classical music that everything needs to be by memory. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was around Clara Schumann's time.
Well, what
But
I read is Liszt was the main culprit in that because
the list.
up until Liszt, pianists were not expected to play from memory, and they usually didn't. Except the times that they were improvising, obviously. But otherwise, when you're playing composition, what I read, interesting to me, is that it was considered as sort of an affront to the composer to not have the music out there because it's like you're not respecting, what's written there, and you think you're going to remember all the details or something like that. I even remember some quote attributed to Chopin, in which he heard a pianist playing one of his pieces from memory in performance, and he made some comment about like he's not getting it right. He should have the music up there, something like that. But so
I think it's strange. I think I mean, it obviously depends on the person. I will say that I do think that there is a difference, at least in terms of my own playing, that I noticed when you're playing it by memory versus if you're doing it with the music. Because there have been actually, especially in recent times, there have been a couple concerts that I felt like I have to use the music for, certain pieces, just because either it was a really quick learn and I just want to play it to the best of my abilities. And I feel like if I use the music, it'll help me instead of being a hindrance. But then at the same time, I do feel like there's a certain kind of improvisatory quality that you do lose sometimes when you're doing it with the music versus when you're doing it by memory. I feel like you, in some ways, internalize it more when you're doing it by memory. But that being said, I kind of would be a hypocrite to say that I don't do it because I mean, even there was a competition at Juilliard where there's the concerto competition that they hold every year. And my teacher signed me up for it, kind of not knowing that I didn't know the piece. So it was a very quick, like a 3-day learn on it. And I really tried to push myself to it by memory, and I just couldn't. So I felt like, either I drop out or I just, make it obvious enough. I don't want to hide it, I'll make it obvious enough that I'm using the music. So I tried to do that, and I brought the iPad with me to the call. And I was lucky enough to advance through the round, and I was lucky enough to end up winning it. But afterwards, there was a whole discussion raised by a lot of people at Juilliard who said, well, it's not really fair. He used the music versus the other people that took the time to really memorize it. And it turned into this, whole debate on that. And
Interesting.
there's a lot of musicians nowadays, like Yuja, who for a lot of her solo concerts has been using an iPad. And I don't know what the reason is, but my
Yuja Wang, is that?
Yuja Wang, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. My best, I mean, she doesn't do it for a lot of things, but I think for some solos, and my only guess is that she's doing so much music at one time. And
wow.
not only that, but she's doing actually a format that I love and that I think that every person in classical music, I'm hoping that it's going to start to be, a new trend, which is there's not even a program that's written for the concert. She got rid of the programs and she just lets the audience know on the spot, what she's going to play.
Really? I haven't heard of
I
that.
mean, that's what I've heard. I
That's,
haven't
oh,
been
it's
to
quite
the
a concept.
concert.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that concept because it's so free and it totally, eliminates that stuffy, pretentious quality that classical music gets a bad rep on a lot of the time.
Right. That sounds like a wonderful idea because we need to draw more people, more young people toward classical music. And part of the problem is that it has this reputation, as you say, for being very stuffy, and everything has to be done just the way it's always been done, that
No, I
kind
mean,
of
I,
thing.
I think it's a different way. I think it's a fun, approach. And I just certainly don't think it's the only way. And I think, obviously there's, a traditional aspect of it that has worked for this many years. And it's what's reeled in, myself and so many other musicians to begin with. So I'm not saying that it should be, completely eliminated, but I do think that there's other options. And I don't think that there's a right or wrong way of doing it.
Yeah.
That's kind of the beauty of, yeah.
It seems to me that it's a good thing, a healthy thing, if it's more accepted for pianists to use the score. Although I'm sure pianists would often opt for playing from memory because, as you alluded to, it gives you a freedom, right? So if you don't have the score in front of you and you're not sort of tempted to be looking at it, if you have it solidly in your head, you feel more free not to have any music out there, right? Also, not to have to deal with a page turner because we have so many notes that, unlike most instruments that have a single line, and they can usually manage to turn their own pages because they can wait long enough for a break. But the notes go by so fast when we have the two or more staffs at one time. So it's like it's very difficult to turn pages in certain things, right? So it's like it's kind of a nuisance. It's better if just you play from memory. You don't have to deal with that, right?
Thank God for the, invention of the iPad and the pedals, which
Oh, right. And that, I've never even tried that. Now that you remind me about that, I heard about that. How's that even work with on an iPad? You don't have to turn pages. You have to touch the screen, I guess, don't you?
I was the biggest skeptic of it in the beginning, and I swore to myself that's never going to be me. I'm always going to use, paper music, and to this day, I still kind of prefer the paper music. But I do have to say that the iPad and the pedals make life so much
The
easier.
pedals. So how does
Pedal.
that work?
Yeah, so there's an iPad, and then it comes with, well, it doesn't come, you have to buy them, but
Yeah.
you can get these pedals that are specially designed for an app, or maybe it works for any app. I'm not really sure, but there's an app called Fourscore, where you can download, any of the music. A lot of times you just get it off of IMSLP. There's a free, music web page that has pretty well everything up until contemporary music. And then you get it, and you get these pedals, and I mean, everybody has a different approach for how you set them up, but I just put them next to I guess it would be my left foot, so right by the soft pedal for the
Oh,
piano.
huh, I didn't realize that's what they're doing. I never noticed it.
Yeah, 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 and then you would just, use your foot and use it.
That's
Because
how they turn the page with their foot,
yeah,
with
I
their
mean,
left foot.
you're not going to use the soft pedal, 24/7 when you're playing. So,
Right.
it doesn't interfere with anything. And other times you can have, instead of having a page turner, manually turn the pages for the music, or even tap on the screen, you can just have them take the pedal and just, hit the button, which
Oh,
is
right.
so much easier.
Yeah. That's kind of amazing. I'll have to look into that for myself, just out of my own curiosity, for the playing that I do. I'm sort of getting back a little to playing because I hardly played for decades, just very rarely. But I'm getting back a little bit more into it, just for my own pleasure, really. We mentioned your solo performances and your solo recitals, that is, and your concerto performances. So let's listen to an excerpt from a solo performance. We have the Cacciatorian Sonata. You want to set this up for us? You remember where that was?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This was at the Morgan Library, and it was yeah. I got a free choice of program. It was just a solo recital, and I was thinking, I think at that time I was just experimenting with new works, and I found, this is the amazing part of YouTube, that you can just go on it, and you can scroll down on your whatever recommended, or I don't know what it's called, and you find new music all the time that you can dive into. So I think I did the Sibelius Sonata and the Cacciatorian Sonata,
Oh,
both of which are pieces that are really never played.
yeah, very obscure.
Yeah,
I had never
like
heard either one of them.
two recordings at max of them. But I fell in love with the recordings that I did here. There's a brilliant pianist, John Ogden, who
I
died
remember him.
years ago. Yeah,
Yeah,
uh, brilliant pianist who
yeah.
played the Sibelius beautifully, and that's where I fell in love with that. And the Cacciatorian, actually not sure who played it, but I heard some recording of it that blew me away. So I thought that it would be an interesting pairing.
So let's listen a little bit to Maxim Lando playing Cacciatorian Sonata. That was Maxim Lando, my special guest today, playing the Cacciatorian Sonata. Pianists always have to deal with playing an unfamiliar piano in every new venue. How much is that a factor for you? Is it much of a problem? Has it ever presented a problem, or is it something that really doesn't phase you when you have a very different kinds of pianos every place you play? You know, different makes, models, different action, different feel, and all that stuff. Is that something that is much of an issue for you or not?
Well, I'd be lying to say that it doesn't play any role. I mean, of course, it's very different than if you're a violinist or if you're a, instrumentalist, in the sense that, you don't have your Strad to carry around with you, per se, for different concerts. But no, I think that it's one of the exciting things about being a pianist, that you get the luxury to take whatever instrument is given to you. And, of course, it's going to be a toss up. You're going to have some, really bad pianos that you have to kind of work on to bring out a sound. And you're going to have some pianos that you have to do very little to, and the sound kind of just rings out. But both are kind of a fun part of the process. I actually like in some ways the pianos that you have to work more for, even better, because it forces you to do more with your tone and do more your kind of fingering and finger work with it. And I think in some ways you even have more of a personality because you're trying even more. I mean, if you have a piano that just does everything that you're asking for it, a lot of times it's easy just to, okay, you're going to play on this piano and the sound
So
comes
easy.
out.
It played itself.
Yeah, exactly. It just comes out naturally. And that's great. I'm not in any way that I don't want that kind of piano. I really would prefer that. But I do like kind of the mix. And it's a fun part.
Yeah. Now Steinways are ubiquitous because Steinway is the most famous, and I guess prestigious. Well, that's debatable, but certainly the most famous piano manufacturer in concert halls all over, more prevalent than any other. I'm interested, since you've performed in Europe, I assume you've performed on Hamburg Steinways, because that's what they have over there. Because there are two, for those who don't know, there are two Steinway factories. One is New York, one is Hamburg. They produce their Steinways. For North America, it's always the New York Steinways, and for most of the rest of the world, it's Hamburg is what is played. Have you noticed a difference? I've never tried a Hamburg Steinway. I've never had the opportunity. So only New York Steinways. But have you noticed some kind of difference in the way they're made?
Yeah, well, strange. For the longest time, I thought that my Steinway that I have at home, which is actually my teacher's piano, he couldn't fit it when he moved from Boston to New York. He couldn't fit it in his apartment. So we adopted the piano. And for the longest time, I was convinced that it was a Hamburg Steinway. So I would be playing on it and I'd be like, my God, the Hamburg Steinways they have this, explosive bass to it. And it pops out. And that's what I've always heard about the Hamburgs. I've always heard that they have, this deeper, richer sound. I probably have to be careful on what I say because I don't want to offend the New York Steinways and anyway, but actually,
I've heard that also, read that also, that usually the people usually say that Hamburg is superior overall. Most people say it, not everybody, but yeah.
I mean, I think that, the notion has always been that it has this richer, deep texture to it. But it turned out that piano was a New York Steinway. So, my honest take on that is that I have no clue. I cannot tell particularly the difference between a Hamburg and a New York. And I think that there are, a hit or a miss, for Hamburgs and for New York Steinways. It's
probably more just the individual piano. There certainly is variance, right? I'm sure you've encountered that too, that even on Steinway Ds, which I assume normally you perform on, but they're not all the same, right? There's probably quite a difference from piano to piano, right?
Oh, there's a huge difference. I mean, just because you play on, one great Steinway one day, you can play on a, terrible one the next day. And again, I probably shouldn't say that. I mean, there's, the majority of Steinway pianos are fantastic. I think that is the general view.
Right.
I will say my favorite pianos to play on in general, a lot of times are those really old ones that are missing some of the keys.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah,
you really like to challenge yourself, don't you?
Yeah, actually at the school, at my parents' school, we have two of them that are missing the top 3 or 4 keys. And they're a lot of fun because you can, I don't know, in some ways they force you to experiment with the sound even more, where you can, come up with an octave, but you're missing some of the notes. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Do you rearrange it as you're going?
Like you're half composing it along with the composer, And for the first time, I played on a piano recently that had additional keys. and I've never seen that before. I think instead
A
of
Busendorfer?
I don't remember if it was a Bose. It was one of those. It was either a Bosendorfer or it was some hybrid. I don't know. Maybe it was a Kauai that was having additional.
Oh, maybe this Busendorfer is the one that is famous for that, having those extra bass keys. But
Yeah.
yeah, it could be another manufacturer also.
Oh, I loved that. I
Yeah.
love having because then you get that even deeper texture to it.
The elite, prestigious pianos are, in addition to Steinway, of course, Busendorfer and C. Bechstein is another one, which is very highly rated by those who know. Have you ever played on a C. Bechstein?
Yeah, yeah. We have two of them at the school,
Oh, you
and
do have Bechstein. Oh,
we do. Yeah, yeah. Well, I think we acquired a new one since when you were there last. That has it's very old, beautiful tone to it, and it's a little bit difficult to play on in
mm,
terms of the feeling because it's so old. But when you get that sound, it's magical. But and
right.
also I mean, probably the highlight of my piano career in terms of the instrument that I got to play on. I was at the Yale Historical Instrument Collection a number of years back, and they have Wagner's piano that Liszt frequently played on, and that
Oh, that was a Bechstein, I think, right?
was a Bechstein.
Bechstein and Steinway were rivals for a number of decades, and Bechstein kind of fell into oblivion for a while after World War II, and then recently now they're kind of reviving, for what I've gathered. Are you a Steinway artist? Are you signed by Steinway?
I'm not. No, I'm not.
Okay, because that, I was just thinking, I didn't want to put you on the spot. Maybe I got you in trouble by asking
Oh,
you
no, no, no,
to
no, no,
comment
no.
on Steinway.
No, the
But
only reason I was saying that is because I was just at the Steinway factory in Astoria, and they had the most incredible collection of instruments. But
uh,
I would love to be a Steinway artist someday. I mean, it's yeah, I think whenever you get to play on, the more Steinways you get to play on, the better. That's the bottom line, you know.
yeah, well, despite the debatable aspects about piano to piano or even like Hamburg to New York, I'm sure that most of the Steinways are still beautiful instruments, no matter where they are. But there are those other, it's interesting sometimes just to compare the timbres. There is something a little different about the Busendorfer and the Bechstein, that, and Fazioli. Have you ever
Pacioli.
played one of those? Those are
I
also
have,
elite
and one of
ones.
them with the additional pedal. You got the fourth pedal in there.
Oh, I didn't even know about that. What does
Yeah,
the
I
fourth
think it's
pedal do?
only the largest model of Fazioli, and I don't have a clue what it does, but it does. It changes the timbre. I think it makes it even softer than the
Oh, like extra
original.
super soft pedal, something like that.
Exactly.
Uh, so Maxime, we could go on forever. I'm thinking of just talking. It's so interesting to talk about all these things with you, but everything must come to an end. I think we'll have to draw this to an end for now. Maybe we'll get you back at some point in the future to continue our
Oh, I'd love to.
conversation.
It was so
So
great talking to you, Jonathan.
yeah, thank you. Likewise. So I will put your social media links underneath here for people to be able to stay in touch with you and follow you and check out your concert schedule. I assume the best place for that would be on your website, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
So
trying to update it as much as possible. Social media, I've neglected for my 20 years of living so far, but I am trying to at least I'm starting to see the importance of it. So I'm
mm,
trying to dive into it a little bit more. There's definitely a lot of benefits.
great. So all that stuff, look below this video, everybody, all you viewers out there, for all those links, and make sure to follow and subscribe to all of Maxime's social media and catch his performance live whenever you can. Thanks again, Maxime. And to everybody out there, if you enjoyed this interview, and why wouldn't you, then you should subscribe to this channel right now if you're not already a subscriber, and make sure to hit that notification bell so you won't miss out on future uploads, because I'll have a lot of other fascinating guests coming up on this podcast in the near future. Maxime, it's been great. We'll see you soon, I hope. Good luck with
Absolutely.
everything, all your endeavors, your exciting career, which is in progress already. And to all of you out there, see you soon.